Mars and Maldek, the planet Maldek exploded and created what we now have as the asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter. Some of the survivors that left before the explosion went to the Mars colony,
right,
and they went inside Mars because they felt it would be safer. Mars is also hollow. As the ice comet went past Mars, it pulled off most of the ocean and atmosphere of Mars, leaving it the way we find it now. And even now, scientists are saying that Mars once had oceans.
right,
And it does have a polar cap, and in fact, you can see in the Martian springtime plants growing. There's greenery growing in the northern hemisphere of Mars as you get closer to the northern pole there. So that means there is precipitation, there isn't somewhat of an atmosphere, there must be water underneath the ground in order to nourish these plants. There's a lot that the public doesn't realize that science has not told us, or the government hasn't told us before,
right,
but is now only starting to give us little dribs and drabs from all of this. So what happened was then, the ice comet got closer to what was the Earth. It started to go into a spin around each other, polarizing the oceans. It started to go into a spin around each other, polarizing the oceans of the Earth, spinning it more rapidly, causing polar ice caps to form and land masses to rise up. And then the Earth and the ice comet switched positions, and the ice comet took the second position from the sun, pushing the Earth into the third position. And then the ice comet, being closer to the sun now, melted the ice around the comet and created a very thick cloud cover. And we now know that object as the planet Venus, which is completely covered in clouds. And why? But now the Earth was colonizable because the oceans had been polarized. There's land masses that appeared. The atmosphere was now less liquid in it. And so the reptilians drove another object into the solar system and parked it in orbit in order to colonize the planet. And we now know that object as the moon. The moon is not natural. In fact, it is the only known object in space, supposedly natural, that does not spin. It rotates around the Earth, but only one side faces at all times, just like a vehicle that be parked in orbit.
right,
And if you send a sonic resonance off the surface of the moon, it pings like a hollow object, and it does not thump like a solid object. And in fact, years ago when I was working in Switzerland, there was a science magazine in Switzerland in 1999 or 98 that said the moon should be reclassified because it's hollow and it's not a natural object. So European scientists know a lot about this and actually reveal that to the public more than here in America.
Well, one thing that never gets mentioned, Stewart, and I'm surprised that it doesn't, and I guess this, as you said, attributes the fact they tell us what they want us to hear, is the fact that was many trips as we have gone up into the moon, the Apollo mission, is the fact that was many trips as we have gone up into the moon, the Apollo missions and what have you. It is quite obvious that the moon has no atmosphere. So that would be one clear indication as well.
Well, the other interesting thing is that NASA has recently 3-4 years ago, admitted that there's a very thin atmosphere on the moon and that there might be water.
Oh, that's right. I remember that report.
Yeah, and if you also remember, the astronauts who circled the moon and went to the dark side that we never see, they reported that there was something going on.
One clear indication as well.
Well, the other interesting thing is that NASA has back there. You know, there's actually lakes and other domed areas. And if people have a telescope, a high-powered telescope, on a clear night, a full moon, and you train it at any large crater on the moon, you will be able to see objects and things moving and lights, etc., because there's high activity going on up there.
Wow.
And you will also see remnants of objects that were destroyed as if some kind of a war happened on the surface of the moon. It's quite obvious. And the other factor is that the craters on the moon are not the result of asteroid bombardment. They're the result of a decoy. It's fake. Because craters, when an object hits something like a moon, it doesn't create flat-bottomed craters. It creates deep holes with debris on either side. And now we have these flat-bottomed craters with these even rims around them as if they were manufactured. So I find that quite fascinating as well.
That is. Folks, you're listening to the Investigators Report. I'm Gary Purefoy with our very special guest, Mr. Stewart Swerdlow. We are now in the process of discussing the history of our galaxy, if you may, and we're talking about the moon. And one question I do have, Stewart, before we proceed, the moon in and of itself, being that it is hollow, and I'm pretty sure you can remember this film. It was probably one of the first science fiction films that I watched in its entirety when I was a kid, which was called the movie First Man in the Moon. And what that film illustrated was a mission basically done by a Wright brothers kind of operation. They built this ship, and they, between two men and one of the guy's wife, they landed on the moon. And what they discovered was a somewhat insect-like reptilian race that lived inside the moon. Could it be possible that some of that information came from what we're discussing?
Well, you know, I worked in Hollywood for a number of years, and I can tell you from what a lot of producers that I've met with, they're told basically what to create and how to present it in such a way that the public can understand or assimilate the information. Now, of course, these fiction movies, science fiction, etc., even TV shows, are designed to give out information in such a way that it's a revelation of what something really is about. It's not the complete truth, and it's given in a way that they want you to know, but it still tells you something is different than what you were taught in school. And recently, there's been stories on CNN and AOL science section that says the moon actually came from somewhere else. It's not from our solar system. It doesn't match anything here.
So they're starting to disclose that.
They're starting to give that information out, exactly. And people should question, why do we have this space program that supposedly went to the moon and all of a sudden stopped? Why would they go that far and then ignore it? Because there's something else there that cannot be revealed. And in fact, many of the astronauts who have come forward to say that they have seen vehicles in space that were not from here, and even have photographed them.
Right. Absolutely.
And back in the 70s and early 80s, Leonard Nimoy hosted a show called In Search Of, which really revealed a lot of information in a way that the public could assimilate without going into too much detail about it. That was a very interesting show. So the reptilians from the moon colonized the Earth, and they colonized the largest continent that was above the surface at that time, which today we have called Lemuria. And they were there for quite a number of millennia alone, and they developed quite a civilization on this planet. Today, we still have remnants of that in various locations around the Pacific Basin. And then finally, the humans who were refugees colonized the second largest continent, which we came to know as Atlantis. Now, you have to understand, and I'm making a very long story short, that humans and reptilians are not designed to live in the same environment. They're not made to live in the same culture or planet even, because they're very different species with different mindsets. They don't belong together, so to speak. It's like you wouldn't put a wolf in with a chicken, it just doesn't go together.
Right.
And so there were a lot of wars between Atlantis and Lemuria. The Atlanteans had a lot of technology that was designed to create geomagnetic disturbances that fragmented Lemuria initially. And the same happened with the Atlanteans. There was a lot of breakup of the original continents over the millennia due to wars. The reptilians were the ones who brought the dinosaurs here, and the Atlanteans tried to kill them because they were destroying a lot of the planet. So it's a whole scenario by itself, but there was a peace effort